The rats just got a whole load of new tricks up their sleeve with the Shadow and Blade DLC. In this video we're going to look at the new units up close, take a look at their stats and see what their role may be within the army. We're then going to play a battle to see what the hell they can do. I'll also show you the new Bretonnian free LC. So, let us begin. Yes. So the leader of Clan Ashen, Deathmaster Snitch. He is an assassin through and through. A ton of armor piercing weapon strength, high melee attack which has Weeping Blade, which is basically armor sundering, a hefty charge bonus, a little bit light in the armor but he does have a 30% physical resistance, so he's still pretty tough and can get in and out of combat pretty quickly, so he's a wiry little bugger to get a hold of. And he has all the assassin tricks you would expect: Stalk, Vanguard deployment, concealment bombs, and his own unique ability, the Deathmaster Sigil, which will lock an enemy lord or hero in place for 7 seconds, allowing him to absolutely murder them. And he has a trait called Scaling Damage, which increases the damage he does to his target based on how much health they've lost. He also has 2 items, one a stationary damage vortex spell, and the other a passive which debuffs nearby enemy melee defense and leadership. So long story short, he's going to try and probably successfully murder all enemy characters. And another new lord who's also very good at murdering other characters, the Master Assassin. Very similar to Deathmaster Snitch in melee, not quite as good of course, doesn't have as much weapon strength but does have an anti-infantry bonus. However, he comes with a ranged attack which Snitch does not. Of course that comes with 360 firing and fire whilst moving, so he can kite enemy characters. He can perhaps sneak up on them when they're busy, stab them in the back a little bit and then run away when they turn to fight him, and can start shooting them instead. So he's got some options to play with on how he attacks. There's also poison on that ranged attack, and he has an ability that can reduce enemies' speed by 48%, their missile resistance and their melee defense, so that can be pretty nifty too. For his items, he's got one that reduces enemy melee attack by 40, which is pretty huge because that affects all enemies in range, so that could be pretty powerful in the right situation. And another passive hex that reduces enemy leadership. So those could be used well to support the rest of your army. Though overall, again, he's going to be great at assassinating those characters. And now for a new wizard, the Ashen Sorcerer. He wouldn't be much of an Ashen boy if he didn't have all the tricks up his sleeve though, so he has Vanguard deployment, Stalk, and concealment bombs, which I think are incredibly useful for a wizard, might help keep him alive if people try to assassinate him. He doesn't have the greatest melee stats, but probably better than most other wizards. He's got a fair amount of melee defense, but still only 20 armor, however does have a physical resistance as well. What a weird wizard this one is. But of course his highlight is the new spells he can bring, some of which again play to that trickery of the SKAVEN, which is very much what this DLC is about for the rats, giving them sneaky new tricks. Here's all his spells. If you want to check them out, pause the video and I'll show a few of them in the battle in a minute. And now to the first actual unit, Warp Grinders, and boy are they something different. As you can see, they're wielding a massive warpstone drill. That drill can do a fair amount of armor piercing weapon damage, but that's about all they have in terms of melee stats. Not a lot of melee attack or melee defense, although it is magical damage, but these boys' strength lies in their abilities. They have the Seismic Snare, which is basically a net that will stop units in their tracks and hold them in place, and then they have Warp Quake, where they'll drill into the ground, reducing enemy speed and causing damage to any caught in the AoE. They also have Vanguard deployment and can attack walls and drill them down, basically, putting holes in enemy settlement fortifications. And then we have Ashen's Triads. These Chinese gangster rats are of the anti-large persuasion. They also have armor piercing damage and Weeping Blade to reduce their target's armor by 50%. They also have a charge defense, of course, being an anti-large unit. But they do come with all the sneaky traits you might expect from an Ashen unit: Stalk, Vanguard deployment and concealment bombs. So you can use them a little bit differently than most other anti-large units. However, a lack of armor and melee defense makes them a little bit squishy. However, they do have a 30% physical resistance, so they are tougher than they look. Overall, a great anti-large unit, especially if it's heavily armored, because that armor sundering Weeping Blade will come in handy, especially if they team up with a more powerful unit to do more damage, even a missile unit that can blast the enemy down while their armor is weakened. And then the Regiment of Renown version, Ixcha's Triads. Pretty much the same unit as the regular one, with a few better stats, more melee defense, more melee attack, more leadership. But of course, they've got their own sneaky trick. They can make a decoy of themselves, much like a Lith Anar can. It's a clone of the unit that can be seen on the battlefield by the enemy, and it can interact with enemy units, but it does no damage. It's purely just to get in the way and to cause confusion. A fun little trick we will play with in a minute. And the last melee unit, another regiment of renown, this time of the Death Runners, Visktrin's Death Squad. Much the same as Death Runners obviously, with some improved stats, still got that Weeping Blade, all the obvious tricks, Stalk, Vanguard and Concealment, and an ability that makes them even tougher with more melee defense, extra physical resistance and some speed when their leadership is anything but wavering, basically. So pretty much the same as Death Runners really, just a lot tougher and better at the job. And on to the ranged units with Poisoned Wind Mortars. Now, as it says, they are mortars, so they fire up high and drop down bombs on wherever they want. They don't have to worry about lines of fire. So when they land their armor-piercing missiles on somebody's head, it causes Poisoned Wind, which does damage over time, 10 seconds, and they will be taking constant damage from those Poisoned Wind globes. So a unit that really needs to be kept alive for the whole battle to make the best use of the damage they can do. They do have a fair amount of range at 250, but are pretty useless in melee, so will need protection. And then we have the Avalanche Mortars. Similar to the previous unit in how they operate, but their damage is very, very different. These mortars do 404 armor piercing damage, which is pretty huge. Still got that nice range, rubbish in melee. But their missiles, once they're in the air, they fly towards the enemy and then they explode into clusters and rain down an absolute avalanche of destruction on their enemies. So that's all the new SKAVEN units with all their tricks and traps. We'll get to a battle in a second after the free LC, but take a second to admire this comedy animation. Répanse de Lyonnaise, your new Bretonnian Lord. She's a bit of a tank with lots of armor, lots of leadership and lots of melee defense. Good damage as well, which is armor piercing and anti-infantry, not to mention the melee attack and a decent freaking charge bonus. She's got it all basically. And this unit card is actually from her on foot, not on a horse. I think she gains a bit more armor and of course speed on a horse. So overall, she's a bit of a tank. She's good in a melee fight, whether it's in a crowd or taking on lords and heroes, although her lack of a shield does make her a little bit vulnerable. For her abilities, she's got a passive that increases melee attack and melee defense for nearby friendly units, and an explosion attack that only hurts enemies, doesn't affect friendlies, that reduces melee attack, melee defense, and accuracy of nearby enemy units. So again, a good support ability. She is good at fighting alongside her troops, basically. And for her items, she only has one that increases her damage output fairly significantly for a short time. Overall, she's a tough lady who'll do well supporting her troops, whether that's mixed in with the front line or travelling around with a group of cavalry. And then your new hero, Henry de Massif, aka Castlehead. He's an anti-large melee lord with decent armor piercing damage, decent damage and combat stats overall. Does have a shield as well for a bit of protection. He can be put on a horse or griffin mount. This is the on foot unit card again. And he comes with the Guardian ability, which allows him to cast 15% physical resistance on an enemy lord or hero. No, on a friendly lord or hero. It would be a bit counterproductive if you cast it on the enemy. So make sure he doesn't double cross you by casting it on the enemy. Who knows what goes on in that castle head of his. Otherwise, a good bodyguard unit to your lord, or maybe one to ride around with your cavalry to provide that anti-large boost. So now that you know a thing or two about the new units, let's check them out in a battle. So I've thrown a SKAVEN army together here, which includes all of these new units. My front line is just clan rats with shields. On the edges, clan rat spears with shields, fairly standard. And behind those, I've got all of these new missile units. So I've got the avalanche mortars here. They've got a lot of damage potential, especially when firing into crowds. Bring in the purple doom. And then on the symmetrical other side, I've got the poison wind version. As I say, they're much slower in their damage output. You really need them to survive a long time to get the money's worth out of them. In the middle, I've got some rattling gunners, and then protecting all of these units, I've got some Ashen triads. Now, these of course have stalks, so they can't be seen by the enemy at the moment. I've got some of those on the edges and one in the middle, although the other one on the edge is actually the Regiment of Renown version, Ixcha's triads. These are the ones that can cast a decoy. We're going to try and make good use of that in a bit, and we're going to combo that up with the old warp grinders. So, as I mentioned, not fantastic in melee. They don't have much melee attack or melee defense, but their abilities is really where they shine. And then I've just got a bunch of other clan rats around, SKAVEN slaves, just to protect things and tie up any cavalry that comes around. Now, leading this large contingent of my army is the Ashen sorcerer. He's the one in the middle. I brought all of his spells along just to try and use what I can where may be applicable. So that's my main army, but where the hell is my lord? Well, he's sneaking around the back with Visktrin's Death Squad. And I brought Deathmaster Snitch himself, looking to assassinate as many characters as freaking possible. He is of course very sneaky. Like I said, Vanguard Deployment Stalk, those concealment bombs can be very useful. Death Squad as well, again, much like Death Runners, just going to be a little bit more effective at the job and murdering everything they can from the rear of the army. So they're going to be facing a Bretonnian army. Let's take a look at what they've got. We've got some questing knights here and some Grail knights. This little group of cavalry is led by old Castlehead himself, and he's on a horse. So they're probably going to be looking to flank me, get some damage done to my ranged units. And then the main part of the army, we've got a couple of units of foot squires here. There's a damsel at the back there. Couple of halberds, couple of missiles, peasant bowmen, and then a bunch of men-at-arms with shields. And then on the far flank, some more Grail Knights and some mounted yeomen. So a fairly standard Bretonnian army, led by the lady herself, REPANSE, in all her two-handed sword glory. That is a pretty sweet-looking sword, I must say. So we're going to be looking to use all the SKAVEN tricks and traps to deal with these Bretonnians. My Death Globe mortars are kicking it off here. You can see these are kind of splitting into clusters. If you watch this, it's a single bomb and then it explodes and turns into a bunch of little bombs and just lands and covers massive areas. As you can see, this purple rain is coming in. Oh, this is going to hurt. These things are very, very powerful. Just carpet bombing these Grail Knights. How much damage did it do? How much damage did it do? Half their health. Took off half their freaking health. That is one volley as well. These avalanche mortars are no joke. They may be in need of a nerf. They're so horribly powerful, but they are very expensive. And then the Poison Wind boys over here, I've noticed that they're very inaccurate. They're very, very inaccurate, but it does only take one globe to land to inflict that poison, as it has done here. So it doesn't necessarily matter if you're missing a lot, because as long as one's hitting, you're getting that damage. There is impact damage from those bombs, I think, so more to be done if they do land, but still, if you can inflict that damage over time, it's going to be useful. The Bretonnian army is advancing on me now. I'm going to start firing on REPANSE, who's out front. My little death squad is coming around the back. I'm trying to stay unavoided. There's a damsel at the back who is just asking to be murdered. I've just turned the attention of my avalanche mortars and my poison wind mortars onto this front line. You can see the damage done by one volley of those avalanches there. Nearly routed some men-at-arms already. The cavalry on my left is pushing round. I'm sealing up on this left-hand side. They can't see the Ashen triads yet, though, I don't think. The other lot of cavalry coming in as well. So I've been finding that this new DLC boosts a lot of the stealthy tactics that the SKAVEN can pull, using concealment bombs and Vanguard deployment and Stalk. I've got my concealment bombs going here for these two to sneak up right on that damsel and those archers. And of course the SKAVEN had some sneaky options already, but now they've just got way more to play with. Now here's one of the new spells. This is the Black Whirlwind. As you can see, a whirl of black smoke. And on the inside, it's a fucking party in here. These boys are having a great time. A bit of a mosh pit going on. I don't know why you would complain about this, but that looks like a fun little club to join if that's what you're into. My Death Globe mortars still destroying all the infantry in the world. Now over here I've got some foot squires coming to get into my poor little clan rat, so I'm going to try and protect them a little bit, buy them some time with the Veil of Shadows. This is another one of the new spells. Now this does no damage, but it does create a roadblock. They can now not move through this area until the spell is finished, or if they move out and go around. So lots of disruption potential for that spell. And speaking of disruption, I mentioned earlier about the Ixchas triads and their decoy that they can spawn. Well, I found this incredibly useful for blocking cavalry and stopping their charges. As you can see, this unit came out of nowhere. It will do no damage. It is just a decoy. It is physically there though. It can stop them from moving. It can tie them up. It can keep them in place. And this has been my plan here, to allow the warp grinders to come over and to start doing the damage and to start stabbing them up. And in a second, we're going to get their abilities going and just try to murder these two units of cavalry. Going to get the actual triads in there as well. At the back, my little death squad has been going to work. We're getting into the archers. It looks like Snitch has already killed the damsel. There she is. There's a corpse buried in the grass, the poor lady. She probably did not last very long. She is a bloody mess. Snitch is not messing about. So our sneaky ambush plans have been successful. There's a little bit of infantry coming back, but nothing the death squad can't handle. Still raining down purple death all over the enemy. Honestly, these things are absolutely disgusting, especially to lightly armored troops. And I used the opportunity with the Veil of Shadows, holding those foot squires back, that spell I cast just now. I took the opportunity to bomb those foot squires with my avalanche boys, and boy did they get destroyed. Now over here, my warp grinders are going to work on this cavalry. We've got them snared in place with the seismic snare, and the warp quake is going down. They're drilling into the ground and doing damage to these two units trapped here. You can see the circular area of effect. It's a nice little combo. This may be more effective, perhaps on the front line with a bunch of units trapped in there being affected by that warp quake. Could be very powerful. Around the back, my death squad still fighting its way through some of this infantry. Snitch, though, he's off skis. He's going to go looking for his next victim. Bit of cavalry charging around in my back lines, but I've got a lot of infantry tying them up. They're probably missing opportunities to get after my missiles, though. This cavalry over here is just being pursued by all the Ashen boys and the warp grinders now. REPANSE is in here dealing with some of my clan rats, but guess who's coming to get her? It's old Deathmaster himself. She is in a bit of trouble and she doesn't even know it. Let's see how much damage we can do to her. She's got pretty much full health at the moment. First hit coming in. Does a nice chunk of damage already. Going to bring in the sorcerer to start slapping her as well. She's nearly down to half health already. Snitch is not messing about. Still tying up the cavalry over here. Castlehead's had enough. He's running away. I tried to get the warp grinders after him to drill him a new one, but he ran away. Most of the stuff on the left has been dealt with. A little bit of cavalry around the back causing problems. REPANSE, though, is in trouble. She just tried to escape. She's been routed. She's trying to run away, but the old Deathmaster's sigils come in, pinned her in place, and now she is going to get cut down with her last little bit of health by the Deathmaster. Down she goes. Poor lady. And with that defeat, it's looking pretty bleak for the Bretonnians. That is pretty much it for them. They've been destroyed by my death globes. I think they've got about 2 million kills. And there you go. Some of the new SKAVEN units in action. Lots of exciting things to mess around with now for the SKAVEN. Lots of stealthy new tactics we can pull. I'm looking forward to getting into it. Let's take a look at some kills. 220 for those death globe boys. As I said, they're not messing around. These poison wind ones didn't get so many kills, but their damage over time probably added up. But not maybe to kills unless they got it on the last second. Lots of kills for my death runners as well. The triads and the grinders, mostly fighting cavalry, so not tons of kills for them, but they probably did good damage. But not a lot of kills for anyone. You can see a lot of the Bretonnian units still have a lot of their health bars left. They weren't dead. We didn't actually kill that many of them. They just routed off. Snitch got 4 kills, which isn't bad considering one of them was REPANSE and the other one was a damsel. So there you go. The new SKAVEN units in the Shadow and Blade DLC. As someone who doesn't really play the SKAVEN as a ranged faction, I like to play more of a rush or sneaky faction, this works perfectly for my SKAVEN playstyle. So I look forward to trying these dirty tactics out on people and leaving them thoroughly confused. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. I will see you in the future. Yes, yes.